Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe, and today, in celebration of Howard Days, we decided to honor the great man who gave Conan and his mythology to the world by creating a playlist dedicated solely to celebrating said mythology. Add to this the idea to follow in the Tolkien playlist example by celebrating a similar theme, in this case adventure, and you have this here new Howard playlist. All that aside, here's my attempt at the analysis of one set of adventures, namely that of Connacht, grandfather of Conan the Cimmerian, we all know and love. Connacht is a character primarily explored in Dark Horse's comic book run, which painstakingly put together a rather complex and interesting character who in some ways serves as an interesting mirror to Conan, while at the same time being fairly different. Before we get into that though, it should be noted that the name of Connacht comes from a mythological figure by the name of Con of the Hundred Battles, a fitting name for the grandfather of the greatest warrior in modern mythology, with Con, the ancestor of Neil, the mythic founder of the O'Neill dynasty that dominated Ireland throughout a good chunk of the medieval period, with Con also being the ancestor of the Connacht clan that founded the kingdom and later province of Connacht of Ireland. For one thing, Connacht's adventures in the south end rather differently from those of Conan. While Conan goes on to become king of Aquilonia and successfully builds a life for himself there, does no such thing. He meets with tragedy, bears witness to things that later haunt him, and between those lands and that of his forefathers, he chooses the latter. This is not to say that Conan's choice is better, but that the path chosen by Connacht was one that comes from becoming increasingly disillusioned with the lands through which he travels. The first of the travels mentioned in the story is an interesting case study in the differences that divide Conan and Connacht. The adventure in question is one spoken of by Conan in the opening pages of Dark Horse's one of the 2003 opening issues. Connacht, we discover, came from a southern Cimmerian tribe, and in his youth traveled to the Hyborian kingdoms to the south. It was there that he saw grand monuments, sights, battles, and also apparently enjoyed similar pleasures to those Conan was later wont to enjoy, namely drink and women. Right from the start, we're introduced to the fact that Connacht traveled to Hyperborea, an incredible land of extreme civility, comfort, and endless light. It was retold to Conan in his youth by his grandfather that when these immortals grew tired of life, they would leap from the city and over a cliff to their doom along with all their slaves. What is more is that it is said that this great kingdom of Hyperborea is a land of eversummer, of high towers and marble spires that are as majestic as modern-day skyscrapers. The Hyperboreans, for their parts, are said to be the oldest of the human races, tall, well-shaped, and full of serenity, with these people feeding only upon fruits, with honey and milk pouring down from streams. The image that is painted here is one of an earthly paradise, one incomparable to any other imagined. The trouble with this image is that it is already too good to be true. What is unknown is how much Connacht saw of the lands of Hyperborea. Evidently, he saw a great deal, enough to see the society in action in one of their funerary processions. These funerary processions are shown in a later issue where Conan's lover, Iasmini, was made to leap over the edge against her will. This after Conan had begun a rebellion among the slaves. The rebellion was to be put down, of course, but not before there were massive casualties on both sides. Vowing hatred against Hyperborea, Conan leaps from the cliff from which the Hyperboreans leap from. He was to survive, of course, climbing his way down the face of the canyon that yawned far below him. It is strange how Connacht may have seen what Conan saw, though there does seem to be one distinct difference in their experiences. Conan's was a terrible experience as he buried one of his first loves. Connacht, for his part, told the tales to Conan when he was a child as one of the greatest and most fascinating experiences of his life. The fact that Connacht remembers seeing the Hyperboreans leaping over the side of the cliff with only a sense of wonder and bewilderment is strange. Conan is the one who relates the stories that his grandfather passed down to him in issue number 1, and is filled with wonder at what the old man had recounted to him. It is possible that not all was roses and sunshine during Connacht's time in the city. Truth is, we may never know, at least insofar as the comics go, as he did not stay. The other factor is that the impression one gets is that Connacht simply conveyed the cultural facts without going into too much detail. Where Conan grows to hate the city, with good reason, his grandfather others simply took notice of what he saw and passed it along without as much interest. What can be discerned, though, is that Connacht must have at least gone through some of the same experiences. And by that I mean that considering the Hyborians had a tendency to drug all new arrivals and to force them into the gladiatorial arenas and to otherwise mistreat them and keep them in a semi-drugged state. When I say this, I'm referring to those who were warriors. Connacht doubtlessly somehow ended up like his later descendant, yet somehow managed to retain or even regain his self-awareness. It is fascinating to think that he had help, as Conan did, and that he managed to observe the goings-on of the Hyborians. While it may not have been the same sort of traumatizing incident, it is undeniable that Connacht, what this journey signifies for Connacht is that he was likely, like Conan, drawn north for whatever reason early on, and that we are supposed to look at them as mirrors of one another, with Connacht being the warrior archetype, of course, and Conan the king, with a heavy emphasis on the warrior aspect of that particular type of character, and with both having been bitten by the wanderlust bug. What it also suggests about Connacht's character is that he was of a rather more mild temperament than Conan, taking little that the Hyborians did personally, and looking on them with far less contempt than Conan later does. That said, it is interesting to note that this initial poor experience may have caused Conan to become rather more tolerant of the southern Hyborians, whereas Connacht's poor experience of seeing a woman burnt alive later caused him to develop rather less tolerance for Hyborians in turn. Connacht seems to have kept his emotional distance from the people and slaves of the Hyborians, in marked contrast to his grandson. What is more is that this escape from Hyperborea and the lack of taking it personally gives us two clues to Connacht's nature. One, that he was early in life far less patient than Conan, in that he had little desire to stay still in one area, and also that his journeys were not one of the archetypal barbarian restoring each land to their proper roots, or one of simple adventure for its own sake, like Conan's quests often are. Connacht was exploring for much the same reason Othin in Norse mythology did. That is to say, for knowledge's own sake. He went south and north to explore. It is that simple. Conan left to restore something to those cultures. But in the more literal story sense, he mostly goes from place to place to enjoy the local culture, to observe it, yes, but it is much more from the perspective of a sellsword, while Connacht more in the mold of a tourist. An important way of looking at these tales of Connacht's is as a preparatory one for Conan. That is to say, he went out in the world first to prepare the way, with it being a prelude to Conan's own journeys to those places, with Connacht interestingly passing down his curiosity, his wanderlust, and even his warrior aggression to his grandson. And don't forget to check the other stuff in this Howard playlist. Do remember to smash that like and that subscribe button as though you were Conan smashing his enemies to itty-bitty pieces.